There is a movie on at theaters that is so dangerous that even reviewing it can get you canceled. Even daring to claim that you have gone into the theaters and ordered a ticket for the film is enough for the brigades to come after you. Thus, folks, we will definitely be reviewing Matt Walsh's latest film. But not only that, folks, we're here to tell you the real reason this will be a bomb, and yet not a flop, at the box office. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel that is explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve every single day, 3 times a day, thrice as nice, right here on the Pro Channel. Folks, as we get ready to dive into today's review, consider clicking that like button. All right, so we went and saw a film yesterday whose title is difficult to even say on YouTube. For example, when we come across this R word, no, not that R word, this R word, when we read it in articles and when we say it here on the channel, I always pronounce it Russisch. And the reason that I do that is because the algorithms of YouTube, well, they're lurking around every corner, checking to see if your content is safe, and then ensuring that it will be ad-friendly. That word is definitely not ad-friendly, and, well, we surmise, although we don't know, that it can impact the viewership of a video. But to even review this film by the Daily Wire and Matt Walsh, well, we're going to have to say it. So, folks, let's do the Beetlejuice and see if we're still around. Here we go. Racist. 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 Okay, the video's still running. We're still good. You're still here? All right, well, we'll go then. All right, so Am I Racist? A film that stars Matt Walsh, a follow-up to What is a Woman, is definitely indeedly doodly going to bomb at the box office, and I'll give you the reason why. But it's not going to flop. And the reason it's not going to flop is it's ingenious what they've done here. They have actually inserted what I can only believe to be probably the largesse of the budget straight into the movie. They declare how much these people have agreed to be in the movie, although they don't know what movie they're making and they don't know who's actually interviewing them, but they put on screen how much these people charged to be there. And the wonderful thing about that is that we get to find out that these individuals are not simply truth tellers for the sake of telling truth. And I would put that truth in all lower caps with quotation marks and an asterisk. But they're there because they want to make money, and they want to make lots and lots of money. In fact, you might consider them to be the modern day charlatans. They're running around telling you how you can get rid of, or at least deal with, your supremacy, all the while they are earning that which makes anyone supreme, and that is cold hard cash. Now, I don't mean to say that that makes you supreme in some sort of moral way, but I mean to say that money is power, and power is money. Resources, right? And these people want that. And they will help you rid yourself of your evils. Oh, but they won't. I'll explain that in a moment. For lots and lots of money. So that's one of the greatest exposures. And in fact, one of the greatest exposures in the film is a point where Matt Walsh pays money, reparations, to a man who is mostly of African descent or who is labeled as black. He does so with the author of White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo. And she's there. She doesn't want to give him money, you can tell, because she thinks that the system should give money, not her. Eventually, though, Matt Walsh's character, who is a DEI instructor along the lines of Steve Carell as a boss of a paper company, he convinces her that it is the individual who must take the impetus until the system can catch up. So Robin DiAngelo, who is being paid a hefty sum to appear, offers $30. Well played, Robin. So why will this film flop? Well, it won't, but it will bomb. And those are two different things. Let's explain. The movie is going to bomb at theaters because of its title, largely. There's also the social stigma that you should not go see this film, at least in some circles. Now, in many parts of the country, nobody cares, and you can go watch this freely. But in certain urban centers, it's going to be frowned upon greatly. In fact, you will be seen as someone who's betrayed your aisle of the politicos if you go and see this film. But that is far less than the title. The problem with the title, and I'm talking to you now, Daily Wire, the problem with the title, and maybe this is fine when it comes to streaming. It probably is. In fact, it probably will be highly successful when it comes to streaming. But at the box office, to even order the ticket requires you to make a request of the person who is giving you the tickets and taking your money. You must walk up to the counter and say, I would like 2 tickets for Am I Racist? Now, you can imagine that common individuals out there who are genteel and kind and careful with their words, they might have a bit of a fear, maybe even a phobia, of the idea that they could go to their local theater and perhaps a person who would be declared of minority status or in appearance would be there at the register. And they, being a pale-skinned, European-descended individual, would have to look at that person and say the question, am I a racist? And I think that's enough for many people to say, you know what, I'm going to wait for this to come to streaming, where I think, by the way, it will do quite well for the Daily Wire Plus service. But that's a big ask for many people to go up to a register with the potential of asking someone of color, quote unquote, am I racist? That's tough. So I don't think that many people are going to go see this film at theaters. But let's return now to the idea that they actually baked into the documentary exactly how much they were paying to have these people show up and give their thoughts, their esteemed elite thoughts on all things race. Because those amounts are put up on the screen, we largely know how much this film cost. Now, of course, there are going to be paychecks made to people like Walsh and the producers, including Mr. Boring and Mr. Shapiro, and others, of course, your cameramen, those running every aspect of the technicalities of making a documentary, they have to be paid. But we probably have a pretty good idea how much this thing's going to cost, and it's not going to be much. It's in the low millions, I would say. I could be wrong, but I surmise that it's probably in the low millions. And that means that even if this movie makes very little at the box office, it'll still make back its production. And the fact that it's going to Daily Wire Plus after this also means that it's almost impossible for it to flop, even if it bombs. And it bombing at box offices doesn't necessarily mean that it's a failure at all. In fact, you might consider that whatever it does at the box office is just gravy on top of its real intended purpose, and that is to drive subscribers to Daily Wire Plus. Given all the headlines it's making, and given the efforts to cancel anybody who dares review it, by the way, that's us now too, we don't care. Go ahead, try to cancel us. Given all that effort, that's actually going to create a bigger headline when it hits the streaming platform and may drive more people to view it there in their homes. In fact, you could even go so far as to say that perhaps its box office run is really a marketing ploy for the streaming service. And in that regard, it's genius. So what about the film? Should you dare go and ask a teenage register person at a local cinema whether you're a racist simply by saying the title? Should you go do that? And the answer to that is yes. It's a very good documentary. It's quite enjoyable. I laughed very hard in some places. There were other places that were very uncomfortable. I discovered that Matt Walsh is actually a pretty good comedic actor in some of this. And I also discovered that unfortunately our world has devolved into such a place that if you act like Michael Scott from The Office in real life, it doesn't really faze anybody, because that apparently is how we all act. That which was parody a decade ago is now the norm. And I also discovered that apparently people will go to great lengths to make sure that they conform to whatever is being asked of them out of fear that they'll step outside of the social bubbles in which they inhabit. For example, towards the end of the film, there's a spot where Matt Walsh continuously goes further and further in how people can rid themselves of the demons of their inherent racism. As this kept going and going, you could actually feel that the people behind this were uncomfortable. The people making the film were getting uncomfortable because this was going far and away beyond anything they had ever anticipated. And they eventually did, indeed, have to just stop, because the individuals who were there to seek out how they could dismiss with their superiority, they were not going to stop. There was nothing you could do, apparently, nothing you could ask of them that they would not do, no matter how grotesque, no matter how self-humiliating. But there's perhaps an even more strange aspect to this, and that is that it seems to me that, having watched the documentary, there are a large number of people, and perhaps this is more, what would you say, more focused in a particular biological sex than the other, but there are a lot of people who seem to be addicted to negative emotion, and that this is driving much of what is being critiqued inside the documentary. In other words, there are quite a few people who they enjoy, or at least they are drawn to, the idea of feeling guilt. And I believe, psychologically, that perhaps the reason that they're drawn to that is because if you feel guilt for being better than someone else, or because the system treats you as such, then that inherently must mean you are such. And so it's this very strange way of both having vicious, malignant empathy and simultaneously having the dopamine hit of being higher up in the hierarchy of society. It's a double dose, but it's still no good. It's still a terrible way of achieving either of these things. And the people who are running these schemes and these scams, well, they appear to me to be people who are preying on individuals who are ready to do just what we've discussed. The best part of the documentary, although it's not the funniest by any means, and it's not meant to be, the best part of the documentary is when Matt Walsh sits down with people at biker bars, or, for example, sits down in southern Louisiana with an individual who had migrated to the United States decades ago. Hearing these people talk about how they view race, where essentially they say we all bleed the same, they talk about how God loves us all, it reminded me of how we used to discuss race decades ago. I think there was a time when we were a better world, where we had gotten away from the hatred and the vitriol that separated us. And I despise the idea that we are separated by race. I think it's stupid and dumb, and it's the lowest resolution thinking possible. The idea that we judge someone based on the color of their skin is, well, that's infinitely easier than judging someone based on the full breadth of who they are as a human. And yet, doing the latter is tremendously better than the prior. And so, hearing these people speak normally, it reminded me of just how good so many people still are. Their voices are no longer amplified, and I think that's on purpose. The mainstream media survives as a legacy vestigial dinosaur simply off of rage bait, clickbait, and then they accuse the other side of doing the same. The best parts of this documentary were when, indeed, you got to see average people and their response to Matt Walsh asking them what is in vogue all across our college campuses, driving, by the way, many of our young people to a decade of insanity before hopefully they'll come around later on. I think that this documentary will do quite well in terms of moving some people on the margins to reassess what they believe, and that's a good thing. Will it be a box office thunderous success? No. Is it a flop? It's also not that. You see, whereas Disney has driven away its audiences and made themselves a sort of partisan theatrical release system, except when they're not, with Deadpool and Wolverine and Inside Out 2, where they regulate themselves miraculously, the opposite is true for this documentary. It's not the opposite in terms of it being any less divisive than what Disney does. It's the opposite in that it's reaching out to the other side of the aisle. And while that may be destructive for Disney because they have bloated $200 million plus budgets and sometimes $500 million budgets, for the Daily Wire, you can do this when your budget is $2 million or $3 million or whatever it is. It's very feasible then. In fact, it may be lucrative. And that's why this is a bomb but not a flop, and it might be a very important truth bomb for the masses. I look forward to it coming out on streaming, and I highly encourage people to go see it. My final review score of this is an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect. There are places where it is in a little bit of a lull, and there are places where I feel like there was heavy use of editing, likely because without the editing, the scenes would have been otherwise boring. But I had a good time, and I laughed heartily out loud in several places. I think you will too, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. And I will never be afraid to review something simply because mobs online tell me not to. Folks, we hope you will help us send this out all across the web by clicking that like button. Share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below, let us know your thoughts. And we really hope that you'll be joining us for the Pro Show later today if you're watching this video at the time of release. Pro Show comes out at noon Eastern, and we have an exclusive scoop regarding Star Wars we cannot wait for you to see. All right, it is time for us to bid you adieu, but we do so with sorrow, knowing that it will be time before we get to hang out with you again. Until then, just know that it was an honor sharing our time with you. Thank you for inviting us into your day. We hope we added value. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, keep having fun.
Too small. Too small. Hey, Floral! Quick question. How wide is the average human being in North America?
I don't know. Why?
Well, I'm trying to buy a cannon to shoot Jonas out of for WDW Pro's 100K celebration.
Well, I guess the first line of defense here is reminding you, Pro hasn't hit 100K yet. And also, we can't afford a cannon.
Well, don't worry about the money. Pro will cover it. After all, He's a huge YouTuber now.
Oh, no. I need to call Jonas and let him know to lock down all the pros' accounts. Ugh.
Oh, and remind him, he's gonna need the helmet for the 100K celebration. And maybe some shoulder pads.
Nope.
What do you mean you don't feel safe climbing in there to look around?
How did you get this?
America, baby.